But please welcome to the show, Mr. Jeremy Reisman. Jeremy, hold on, let's get him in here. How you doing, my man?
What's up, fellas? How's it going?
You know what, Jeremy? It's been a great day. It's been a great day. We've been talking a lot about the trade deadline, and finally it's here, so we can kind of get past it. I do just want to get your initial thoughts on the trade itself, what Brad paid for it for Za'Darius, and we understand that now, looking at the edges that were moved, Brad got the best available guy. I know we're in that. I mean, we're talking about Myles Garrett. We're shooting for the moon here. I mean, we're talking Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. And then you start to kind of come back down to earth, and you're like, okay, it's probably realistically Za'Darius Smith. Your thoughts on the trade that occurred today?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it always made the most sense. I think you saw basically every beat writer kind of converge under Za'Darius Smith's name for a reason, right?
Right.
When you're looking for these trade deadline moves, you're looking for someone on a relatively cheap contract, someone maybe even on an expiring contract, someone that can be had for a day 2, day 3 pick, and someone that fits what you want. And one thing we know about the Lions and their player acquisition, particularly when it comes to players outside of the organization already in the NFL, is they're really picky, right? It has to fit their culture. It has to fit their scheme. It has to fit their, it has to be a Dan Campbell guy. And it was very clear doing kind of cursory research after the Aiden Hutchinson injury that Za'Darius Smith checked all those boxes, right? He's a former team captain. He's a guy that doesn't give up on plays. He's a guy that's a very physical pass rusher that can crush the pocket, that isn't going to always lose pass containment. And so it made a ton of sense. I thought the price they paid, particularly with all the reports out there that Cleveland was trying to squeeze a 4th round pick out of someone, they basically gave them a 5th round pick. And if what we think is going to happen this season is going to happen with the Lions, it's a pretty bad 5th round pick, right? It's going to be towards the end of that round. So I think you have to be happy with the trade compensation. You have to be happy with the salary cap impact, which is basically negligible this year. And you have to be kind of ecstatic about the scheme fit because he does exactly what they want.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, it's good seeing you, Jeremy. The stash looks good. I love it. I do want to bring up, and I'm sure you heard a little bit, we were kind of having the conversation before, is just the second move that all of the fans wanted Dan or Brad to make. Did you think there was conversations going on about a second move? And was Brad in there kind of looking around to see some of these guys from New York to Tennessee? What are your thoughts on that? And since he didn't make that move, pretty comfortable with what you have now going forward to win a Super Bowl with that D-line?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of the rumors out there, and I don't have any necessarily inside sources to say that they were true or they were untrue, but I always found a second move to be pretty unlikely given how much Brad Holmes has generally valued his draft picks, given, as you guys were mentioned, like not a lot of guys were out there moving. And so obviously the asking price was high for some of these guys. Particularly it seems like Ojulari was a guy that the Giants were just asking too much money for. And obviously he doesn't end up anywhere, which is probably beneficial to the Lions too, because there were some other teams that it seemed like were interested in acquiring him, particularly in the NFC. So the Lions kind of win out that he's not on a contender for the rest of the year.
Right.
But yeah, I just think in general, you don't see a lot of multiple moves, particularly at one position at the trade deadline. I think part of that is because the Lions want to see what they have. They very much are a develop within type of team. So if you bring in another guy, what does that mean for Josh Pascal's development? If you bring in another guy, what does that mean for Mekhi Wingo? What does that mean for, if you wanted to get maybe an outside linebacker, what does that mean for Trevor Nowaski's development? We know that they like to develop from within, and you're taking away from snaps from those guys that they believe in. They believe in Josh Pascal. They believe in, a bunch of those guys that are still young and they still want to get snaps in on a week-to-week basis. So I'm not surprised that they didn't get a second deal done. Could they use more help on the edge? Yeah, of course. I think most teams could, but to me, it wasn't such a glaring need that they needed to dispose of more day 3 picks when, they're not necessarily running low on picks at all. They obviously don't have a 3rd round pick and now you don't have a 5th round pick, but I think in general, they're in an okay spot with their. I mean, the thing is, let's look at the overall roster too. Let's talk about how the secondary is playing out of their mind. Let's talk about how the offense should be able to outscore most teams every week. You don't necessarily have to push all your chips in when basically the rest of your team is kind of running as it is.
And when you talk about this team, and appreciate you joining, Jeremy, how long do you think it is till do you think we see Za'Darius out there this Sunday, and even if we don't, how long do you think it's so like Za'Darius gets a full workload and he's 100% ready to go for this
Yeah.
defense?
Honestly, I think he plays this week. We asked Dan Campbell maybe a couple of weeks ago, is edge one of those positions where you can just kind of plug and play? And he said, yeah, I mean, if we're going to get involved in the trade market, that's kind of going to be the point, is that we want this guy to come in and fill a role for us right away. And Za'Darius Smith is, he's 32. He's been around the block. There aren't going to be a lot of defensive schemes that he doesn't know or terminology that he doesn't know. I think that's like the biggest hoop is the terminology point, so that he can communicate with his teammates out there on the field. And so maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve there, but the Lions could use the help right away. I think they've got a particularly nice matchup going up against a not so good Texans offensive line this week, where his help would very much be warranted and helpful. So I wouldn't be surprised if he plays right away. Now, one of the kind of interesting factors here is the Browns had a bye week in week 10, this upcoming week. And so if he was kind of banking on kicking his feet up, he's got another thing coming, it looks like. So we'll see if he's physically and mentally ready. But I think the Lions make this move with the expectation that they're going to get some immediate contributions out of him. Maybe not a full workload on this Sunday, but I would be surprised if he doesn't play at least 15 to 20 snaps.
Yeah. And I think people, when they look at Za'Darius, it provides some hope. You lose Aiden Hutchinson. I think a fair expectation would be Za'Darius, fills the void of Davenport, but better, or he fills some of what Aiden did. What's kind of your expectation? You get Za'Darius now to help out. Obviously, Aleem, it'll free him up a little bit, but so you lose Davenport, you lose Aiden. You get Za'Darius. Do you kind of look at like Za'Darius filling some of what Aiden did, and then you kind of got Josh and Levi to kind of make up for Davenport? Booner kind of pointed that earlier. What's kind of your thoughts on how the production will be, salvaged a little bit here? How is it going to be shared amongst the guys?
It's a good question. I do kind of compare his game and maybe his role a lot to Marcus Davenport. And obviously you're still like leaving a big Aiden Hutchinson sized hole in your roster if you just get, Davenport back, so to speak. But I think you're probably going to see a lot of Pascal once he's ready to go on the other side. And then the kind of domino effect there is that you get Levi Onwuzurike back on the inside, where I think he's a little bit more strong. And so it'll be a little bit of a pick your poison situation, and offenses will play it differently, and the Lions will be able to adjust how they want, right? Because they know how the offense is going to line up. They can see where the tight ends are, and if they want Za'Darius Smith free of the tight end on the weak side of the formation, then they'll throw him out there. He's capable of playing both sides, even though he's maybe a little bit more comfortable on the left. And then, I think you saw in last week's game just how impactful Aleem McNeil can be. And at times you're going to have to double Aleem McNeil. At times, if you're going to run the ball, probably going to want to double DJ Reader. And that's kind of the understated point of this whole acquisition, is that you also are getting a pretty good run defender in Za'Darius Smith. And if you've seen the Lions play in the past 3-4 weeks, they haven't been a great run defense team like we've been used to seeing. So now you probably get a much freer Za'Darius Smith, maybe than he even was in Cleveland. Like, they had a really good defensive line, but when it came to defending the run, I would say the Lions have a much better interior defensive line than the Browns do, which could lead to Za'Darius Smith having an even bigger impact in the run game than he did in Cleveland.
That's a great point, actually. I love that, Jeremy. All right, this is still defensive, and I know this is Za'Darius Smith stuff. One thing, though, the last couple of weeks I've noticed is Jack Campbell. And I know you brought up outside of the defensive line, like the safeties have been elite. The corners have been getting better. The interior D-line. But, like, this linebacking core, I brought it up on our show the other day. I give away Kool-Aid jugs, which is basically the game balls. And I gave it to Jack Campbell. And it feels like he's starting to take that turn to where he's becoming one of the better linebackers, not just on the team, but in, like, the NFL. What is the kind of, you're in the building quite a bit. What is the kind of outlook of the Jack Campbell situation? Because Anzo obviously is like the captain of that defense, but Jack's starting to take that step to where it's like he might be able to end up being better than Alex Anzalone. And it's because of his skill and everything that he can just do and his size. What is that outlook, and how does that work with the defense, and how are they going to go forward with that with Anzo, with Jack Campbell?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to think about what they do with Alex Anzalone when his contract is up. I think it's not this upcoming offseason, but the next one. But I think you are starting to see already, like, even a leadership shift, right? And I think just to a kind of salient moment from the Packers game just a couple days ago, where you see Amik Robertson get a third down stop and get all in the Packers receiver's face. And who is the guy that pulls him off to make sure he doesn't get a penalty? It's Jack Campbell. He's right there, kind of being the heart of that defense. And I think one of the coaches even referred to Jack Campbell as the heart of the defense now. So that transformation is definitely coming, and the production is coming with it. I think he's been phenomenal in the run game, even though the Lions have taken maybe a little bit of a step back there. I don't think it's been on him necessarily. I think the step he still has to make is as a coverage guy. And that was, that's always the toughest thing, the thing that comes last for an NFL linebacker, because the speed's different, because the eye candy is a little bit different. There's so many ways that the offense likes to manipulate linebackers in particular that we don't necessarily see as much in college. But the one thing that Dan Campbell talked about this week with Jack Campbell is just, you sometimes forget he's such a young player because he's so locked in, because he's starting to understand things on an elite level, because he plays so much faster than he even did last year. So the development is still happening, but yes, I think we have seen a year or two jump from him. And I do think we're starting to see him kind of take over the middle of that defense in a way that is very much, I think, going to lead to him being a captain, if not next year, then the year after that.
I love that.
When you look at that, Jack Campbell is definitely a long-term option with the Detroit Lions. And Za'Darius Smith, he's not a long-term, but you look into the future, he can be hanging around next year. What do you think that means? Because when you look at, we already kind of compared him and Marcus Davenport. I think as an overall player, and especially when you look at injuries, Za'Darius Smith is the better player there. What do you think the likelihood that he stays around? Do you still think that they would plan to bring Marcus Davenport back as a rotational player if everything goes good with Za'Darius Smith this season?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, financially, it's a relatively easy decision. He's only got, I think, an 11 million cap hit left, and that would even be split between 2025 and 2026. Even though he's not under contract in 2026, they're using kind of void years there in Cleveland that the Lions inherit. That will make sure that he's just going to be about a 5 million cap hit next year if the Lions decide to keep him, which is very workable considering there's still some guys that they're probably going to want to extend next year. They're going to need some cap space for free agency in the draft. It's doable there. I don't. The other things to consider is whether Za'Darius Smith is going to want to play on a cheap contract like that, or want to restructure it, or want an extension. He's kind of had a couple of contract disputes in the past and want his worth. So I wouldn't say that 2025 year is guaranteed for him. And then when you throw Marcus Davenport in there, I mean, he's exactly what they want in a player, but he has proven to be untrustworthy over the past 3 or 4 years, just in terms of his injury situation. So he certainly can't be plan A, but if Za'Darius Smith is in town, could he be a valuable plan B that comes, I have to imagine, at a relatively cheap price as well? Sure. But at some point, you're going to want to also plan for the long-term future. And maybe that's Josh Paschal. Maybe Paschal is more of a rotational guy as well. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the Lions kind of get involved in the draft to add to their edge room too. I know we're getting a little too far down the line.
But never too early, Jeremy.
That's right. But those are decisions that, or at least conversations that are probably happening in the front office right now, right? Is, okay, are we going to keep Za'Darius Smith for another year? Are we going to look into bringing Marcus Davenport back? Like, that is general managing is a full-time job, a year-round job. So those conversations are definitely being had, but obviously you have to see how the fit works with Za'Darius Smith. You have to see how well Josh Paschal plays down the stretch here, and maybe he is your guy. But I think it's certainly possible to bring all those guys back, but there's so much to kind of play out here over the last 9 weeks of the season and the playoffs to really make a definitive decision yet.
Yeah, great insight, Jeremy. Hey, and by the way, I'm glad we have you, Jeremy, because Kyle, he's hanging it up, unfortunately, and he's been doing some great work. You better be around for a lot longer. All right, Jeremy?
Let's go.
You're not going nowhere, Jeremy. We need
Appreciate
you.
That.
Keep up the great
plan.
work, my friend.
Can
We'll talk to you soon. What's up, Boone?
I just want to ask one more question. Something that's been talked about this week is the Lions, obviously 7-1. Everyone's like, where's the next loss? What do you think the finishing record is? I'm interested. I should have asked Corey too. I'm interested to know the finishing record.
Man, it's a good question, because I think I had them at 12-5 at the beginning of the season, and I definitely would bump that prediction up at this point. I think, I mean, it's not an easy schedule, right? And I think at some point they're probably going to drop a divisional game just because those games are extremely hard. I know they just beat the 2 best teams in the division on the road, but I think it's just hard to win both those games in a season because now they have tape on you and both teams kind of adjust in that second game. So I'll say they drop one of the division games and then probably one of the games to either the Bills or the 49ers. But other than that, if I had to adjust my prediction right now, it sounds crazy to say it out loud, but 14-3 is what I'd go with right now.
Ooh,
14.
okay.
I love that number.
I love that number. Number 1 seed, you getting that bye. At least, hey, Za'Darius will get a bye at least somewhere.
There you go. He gets and maybe we sit him in week 18. Those are his 2 bye weeks.
There you go.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
There you
I
go.
like that.
All right, Jeremy, we'll talk to you soon. Keep up the great work.
All right, sounds good.
There you
Appreciate
go.
it, Jeremy.
Jeremy Reisman, proud of Detroit, joining the program to talk some NFL trade deadline with the fellas. Appreciate him. It's always good having Jeremy on, man. Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, officialctsports.com.